Greetings, world history people. Great to see you, sort of. We are going to embark on a fabulous new part of our journey this week, and so I wanted to introduce it not just by posting things on Canvas, but by talking to you. So this week we're going to be talking about globalization, starting to talk about what that is, what that means, and what it has to do with you. So we'll have some reading this week about globalization. That'll start to prepare us for the final exam. And we will talk about that final exam as we move through this globalization project. So what in the world does it have to do with Rambo? That's a good question. I'm glad you asked. So one time, way back, way in the distant past, in historical time, one time I was traveling through Southeast Asia, and I was in Indonesia. But more than that, I was in Bali. And then more than that, I was in Lombok. And then even more than that, I was in this tiny little bit of an island here called Gili Air. There's 3 Gilis there, 3 little Gili islands. I don't know why they're called that, but I do teach geography too. I should probably know why they're called that. But Gili Air is this first little one right there. You want to see what it looks like up close? It looks like that up close. It's amazing. It's excellent. The point is, go back to our Rambo. What does it have to do with Rambo? Well, I was on Gili Air at a time when there were no televisions on the island, there were no cars on the island, there were a couple of little hotels. They were mainly like, I think I paid $8 a night, and that included 3 meals and a bed with a mosquito net over it. That was it. There were kids who grew up on the island and they'd never been off the island. And talking to their parents, they had never sort of been outside of that world. There are no TVs. There's no movie theater, there's nothing. And one of the kids, as I'm walking around one day, jumps out of the forest and has a stick. And he points the stick at me and he says, "Aye, Rambo!" This little kid on Gili Air, off of Lombok, off of Bali in Indonesia, in the middle of nowhere, somehow still knew about Rambo. And so what we're talking about today definitely has to do with that. It's called globalization. Globalization is the spread of products, technology, information, and jobs across national borders and cultures. It's been happening for millennium. And if you think about our Silk Road project, way back when, remember that Silk Road project? That had everything to do with early forms of globalization. In economic terms, it describes an interdependence of nations around the globe fostered through free trade. This is from Investopedia. Here's another one from the Peterson Institute. It's the word globalization is the word used to describe the growing interdependence of the world's economies, cultures, populations. Interdependence of those things. And so there we have it. Let's look at one example before we move on. I love this example. Just to see the scope of globalization in one industry, and it's an industry that has grown like crazy in other parts of the world. So if you don't know, Bollywood is the term for Hollywood-style movies that are made in India. In terms of the number of films produced, Bollywood is on top of the pile with 1,600 in 2012 alone. So they produce even more movies than are produced in Hollywood. Now, they don't sell as many they do sell as many tickets, but they don't gross as much. I think that's the key. Hollywood still owns that sort of globalized market. They know how to take a movie that maybe only makes 10 million at home and have it go around the world and make another 50 million. So then with globalization, I want you to start by thinking about your own spending habits. Just to start to think about mine, since we started this seclusion, I've purchased a whole bunch of irrigation material for the yard, produced in China mainly. A new Canon printer, bought at Best Buy, but made in Japan. A shirt from REI, that's a black diamond shirt, which until recently was made in China. Some Allbirds shoes, and they're touted for being very natural and eco-friendly. But it's from New Zealand wool and rubber from the Amazon, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. If you think about where our products are coming from, it's almost impossible to entirely buy local. And in fact, if you did only buy local, you would end up hurting that local market. So the point is not just to say, just buy American, buy only local. That we need to do that. We absolutely need to do that. But we can't have that attitude about it, number one. And we definitely, if we only did that, you will end up hurting your own economy. Remember, one of our biggest exports is service jobs. We benefit from globalization in this country. And in fact, every large country that got in early in globalization benefit from it. Not so much by trading stuff anymore. So if you look at the trading of goods has gone down drastically. And this is from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis and the U.S. Bureau of the Census. So this is about the trade imbalance. But look at as the trade in goods drops pretty significantly, the trade in services is going up. We are making money in this globalized economy by becoming educated and by trading in services, by servicing that world economy. The point is, globalization is a complex interaction of ideas and stuff. Very elegantly put, right? So now that we've started to talk globalization, let's connect it to critical thinking. This year, in class, we talked about lots of critical thinking strategies and ways of doing better critical thinking through history. If you think about it, in class, we practiced repeatedly making good claims, making an argument. Remember that sort of little formula we talked about? Claim, therefore, statement. So if you remember, we practiced this repeatedly together in class. These are the skills that we built in class. The suspension of judgment, corroboration using multiple sources. And then finally, out of class, we did a little thing on Plato's allegory of the cave. I loved reading your responses and your thoughts about your own need to sort of check your own attitudes and everything in terms of Plato's cave. So we practice checking our own thinking, self-discipline, self-monitoring, deep thinking about our world. Now we're going to use those skills to talk about becoming global citizens who are able to cope with increasing levels of globalization. Not just cope with them, but actually succeed in that world. So we're going to do a little bit of reading. One of the readings will have to do with this. Here's what a Korean boy band can teach us about globalization. That's fascinating. Another one of the readings will have to do with a Barcelona t-shirt. T-shirts and globalization. It's another big theme that comes up a lot. So I want you to think about your relationship with the outside world. In what ways do you interact with goods, technology, or culture that is a part of the globalization or global interaction that we call globalization? So you're going to have a couple of readings for this. As you begin to read through those, there will be very short written responses on Canvas to those readings. But remember, this is going to start to get us ready for the final. And then as you prepare for that final, we'll talk specifically about what that will look like. Oh, look, made in China. It says it right there.